Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Music Technology. Today we're looking at the Arturia Pigments. Pigments is a brand new software synthesizer from Arturia that draws on all of their decades of experience of making and modelling virtual analog synthesizers. And of course they've been building their own hardware synthesizers for quite some time, but never an actual soft synth, a VST instrument. And so with Pigments, Arturia hope to be able to say to the world, look, we can do it all in software. It's awesome, look at this thing. And this is really where they've been heading all this time. And that's great, because it sounds awesome. But then that brings us to a thing, by which I mean software synthesizers these days are phenomenal. They can produce the most extraordinary sounds, and we expect extraordinary sounds from our software synths. I mean, there's this pool of people who design presets for all these synthesizers, and Arturia have grabbed a whole bunch of those and set them to work designing the most extraordinary sounds you could possibly imagine. And here we have extraordinary sounds. But I would suggest perhaps that we find extraordinary sounds in all sorts of software synthesizers, and it's really difficult to say, oh yeah, this one sounds fantastic and this one sounds better than this one, because they all just sound fantastic. I mean, Arturia's own Analogue lab, which pulls together the collection of all their different synthesizers and sounds and stuffs them together into one software synthesizer, sounds flipping awesome. It's got a whole load of stuff in there, which is just amazing. So in some ways we have this orgy of sound going on. What are we supposed to do with all this? How do we navigate through all of the sumptuousness? I mean, it's just lovely. It's full of loveliness, and we could expect that. I mean, we're never going to expect someone like Arturia to release a software synthesizer that sounds a bit meh. You know, it's just going to sound great, and it does. So how is it best to talk about and describe and demonstrate a software synthesizer like this in a way that can be useful or graspable? Because ultimately it's becoming less about the sound, because sounds are awesome. Obviously that's a factor, but it's becoming less about that and more about the creative and inspirational opportunities within that piece of software. Does it just give us something blank and dull that you just step through preset after preset, or does it invite us in to play and to tweak and to design and to start pulling out different things in order to create your own sound? Because all of these people who make these presets, I'm sure they're fabulous, but they're their presets, you know. And personally, I have sort of fought my way out of the preset trap. I don't want to just be going, oh, so I'm looking for a something or other. Is it that? Oh yeah, I mean, I could use that, or yeah, that's nice, but is that me? You know, is that anything to do with me, or is it just somebody else's sound? That raises lots of interesting questions. So what am I trying to do here? Well, I just want to spend a little bit of time with Pigments, start off with some basic sounds and some basic waveforms, perhaps, and just see where that takes us. I'm sure there's lots of other videos out there that will show you the range of sounds and how awesome this is. But what I want to get down to is how easy is it to work with this piece of software? How can I create and modulate sound? Is that possible? Is it intuitive? Because currently I have a slight pre-release version here, and I don't have a manual. There's no instructional tutorials that I can go through to work out how best to use it. So how easy is it to intuit your way into Pigments? Is it all just this massive sound engine that's impossible to navigate, or is there stuff in there that helps me be creative. Tall order. Let's see what I can find out. But first, let me bring you in for a very quick overview. So here we are, pigments, and as the name suggests, it uses a lot of colour. And it's not necessarily immediately obvious, but the visualization they've built into this is actually really, really nice. Everything moves, everything's animated, and I love that. I really appreciate a good bit of visual feedback. So at the top here you have your oscillators, or your potential oscillators. You have two sound engines, engine 1, engine 2. They can be wavetable, or they can be virtual analog. Within a wavetable engine, you've just got the single wavetable doing the thing that you want it to do, and you're moving and morphing between them if you wish, or you're stepping between them if you don't wish. On the analog side, you can choose different types of waveforms. You've got your squares, you've got your triangles and your sines and all that kind of thing, and you mix them together, and there's 3 of them and they all affect one another. On this side, you've got a pair of filters you can use in series or in parallel and different sorts of routing, with a whole stack of different filter types, from matrix, mini, surgeon, don't know what that is, formant, multi-mode, all those bits and pieces. And then you can get stuck in there and do your filtering. And then everything else is dealt with down in this bottom half, the sort of the modulation half. Don't be fooled by the keyboard. That's the least interesting thing that you can have shown. Here you have all these different parameters. You've got velocity, you've got aftertouch, mod wheel. See, you see this moving here? The animation of it, I love it. I'm moving the mod wheel over here, and this is showing you exactly what's going on. You see the mod wheel moving? That's moving that. It also happens to be moving the filter over there. Oh my goodness, lots of things going on. You've got expression, you've got keyboard, you've got envelopes. And as you touch them, or mouse on them, or whatever it is you want to do, it appears down here in this section. So LFOs, 1, 2, 3, and you can assign them to whatever you like. You've got all sorts of different shapes and stuff going on. You can phase them about, symmetry, rate, speed. It's all animated, it's all gorgeous, it's all lovely. You also have functions that I don't really understand what those are all about, but they're lovely. And you've got randomization, which is my favorite thing. You've got a Turing machine style randomization, you've got sample and hold, you've got some binary thing over here. I guess that's probably more to do with triggers than anything. Oh, I don't know. Who knows? And then you've got a combination where you can combine different modulation sources together and send that out to stuff. And so what we find down here at the bottom is all this exciting potential for modulation. From a keyboard, simple pitch and mod wheels, through to envelopes, low frequency oscillators, functions, randomization, and then combinations therein. And you can apply anything to anything, map anything to anything. And it's ridiculously easy to do, which we'll get into in a moment. There's a couple more pages. There's an effects page, which is really very dull, which is a shame. And then following on with this dull theme is the sequencer side. Now, the sequencer is extraordinary. We'll get into that in a moment. But is also extremely dull. It's like when they were designing an interface, they went, oh wow, we're going to spend all our time designing this, right? So that this is just the most amazing thing you ever saw. You go, wow, great, great. Okay, so now we've only got a couple of hours to finish off this piece of software. Right, so what are you doing with the sequencer? Oh, I know, just a few grey lines. Oh, okay, great. Let's go with that. So this thing here is just a bit sort of dull and uninteresting, which is a shame, because everything else is so dynamic and exciting. Whoa! Or maybe the sequencer part is where you need to calm yourself down and just chill out and do normal things. So anyway, so that is your basic overview. You have virtual analog, you have wavetable crashing together through 2 filters and an enormous modulation engine, resulting in a few effects and some sequencing or arpeggiating. That's it really, and out of that you get a whole load of sounds. Of course, there's a gazillion sounds in here of every type and sort and everything else you could possibly imagine. And just look how it animates. It's brilliant. I love it. The animation is fantastic. This is exactly what I need in a synthesizer. It's what I want. I want to be able to see things moving. I want to be able to see what that is. And it's just brilliant. I mean, anyone who writes a software synthesizer that doesn't show animated LFOs, it doesn't show what parameters are being moved, is an idiot. Whereas this shows you everything. I know what the LFO is doing. I know the shape that it's using. I know what's active and what isn't. And somewhere in there, I can probably find what they are actually connected to. Well, of course I can. I mean, I can touch on them, and it shows me here. And it shows me here. Let's pick something simple like the LFO, and let's attach it to something. So the filter, for instance, let's move that about. And there it is, it's doing it. And it tells me it's doing it. And it knows what it's doing it, and it shows it in yellow, and this is in yellow, and it shows me what that is. That's just brilliant. Bring up the LFO down here, it's LFO number 1. Let's change something. Ooh. And it's showing me that. It's all connected, it's all animated, it's all living and breathing together in this wonderfully visual and exciting place. Yes, I think Arturia have really nailed it in terms of connecting the sound, the sonic and the visual all in one lovely synthesizer playground. So we'll start with a basic waveform, a wavetable waveform of a sine wave. And you can see that already stuff is going on. It's already registering my velocity down here as a function that it can use, and the fact that the keyboard's turning on and off. It's also giving me a basic envelope. Here we go, envelope 1, just on the VCA. Everything is basic. Everything is ready for us to design our own little world. So this is wavetable. Let's have a look at the wavetables. What possible wavetables could I possibly have within this possible wavetable thing? Well, let's have a look at basic waveforms is what we're on at the moment. And if I use the position knob here, I can morph completely between the usual suspects, the saws, the triangles and the sines, and it can morph beautifully. It doesn't have to morph. You can turn morph off, and it will then just switch between each wave within the wavetable. But of course you've got a whole gazillion wavetables to choose from. Let's try something like that one. Or this one. So you've found your desirable wavetable sound, and now you've got all sorts of things you can do with it. You can tune it, of course, interested in that, but you can add voices. Which you can then detune. And you have classic options or you have chord options. And then you have these 4 marvellous little sections here which just destroy your waveform. So a bit of frequency modulation. Oh, how good is that? How nice is that? Bit of phase modulation. Bit of phase distortion. And then wave folding. It's just simple, it's delicious, and it's instantly rewarding, because you not only hear the difference as to what's going on, but you can see it, and that gives you a better experience. It's like using an oscilloscope on your Eurorack or in any other situation. Seeing those waveforms, for me, in my experience of synthesis, it just brings a whole other world into the situation. And of course what I want to be doing is modulating it. So let's pick an LFO. Let's bring the LFOs up down at the bottom. Simple moving LFO. Let's patch it to something. In order to map an LFO, a little ring appears around each control. Some of the smaller controls it's a little bit harder to see, but you can see it on the larger controls and very easily grab it with your finger. However, on the smaller controls that's a bit more difficult. I mean, the Arturia synths on a whole are really good with touch, multi-touch, more than one thing at a time. And that works brilliantly in most cases. There's a few bits and pieces where it doesn't really work, like accessing menus and bits and pieces, and sometimes some of the controls are too small. So I have, I'll have to revert to a mouse every now and again just to show what it is I'm doing. So LFO number 1 here, can you see the little yellow circle that appears around the control? So I can click on that and drag, and it will start using the LFO. So I can wavefold. What I'd like to do is turn that down so it's going very nice and slowly. If I put that a bit more in the middle, it can then go both ways, like so. I'm going to use LFO number 2. I'm going to set that to position here. Again, set that nice and slow. Number 3, set that to frequency modulation. But it doesn't have to be connected to one thing, it could be connected to multiple things. We can make them all subject to the same LFO or to different things. Let's stick it on the filter as well. Stick a bit of that in there. I'm going to stick the... And you can see them all appearing here as you add different modulation possibilities. LF2, I'm going to stick that on the resonance, like so. Let's stick that up a little bit. In a resonance down, I think. I mean, how delicious is all that? And I've not done very much. I've just applied a few little bits of modulation to a couple of the controls here, and I'm already crafting in some kind of waveform movement and evolution of sound that's just me and usable and something that I did. And I haven't even started. I mean, stick some delays and bits and pieces in there. Or maybe let's move from LFO into something more random, like the Turing machine. Why don't we use that? So we could take our Turing here and we can stick that to the filter. But there's tons of stuff in here. There's an option here that says sidechain, which I'm not really sure what that does, but it brings up a whole load of other bits and pieces. You can map anything to anything. We've even got these macro knobs down here, which you can map to dozens of other parameters, so you can move them all together at once, all relative to each other. It's just an extraordinary thing, and it's so easy. You want to do something, you click on it and you move the parameter. And we haven't even talked about envelopes. I mean, envelopes, for heaven's sake. Let's get some attack in there. So here it is. You know exactly where you're on the envelope because it's animated and it's showing you what's going on. Beautiful. And we're only using one sound engine. So let's switch to the simplicity of the virtual analog. Now I've still got the Turing machine messing around with the filter. Sorry, I just really like it. Alright, let's turn that off. So in engine 2 with our virtual analog we have sine waves, triangle, sawtooth and square. You can have one of each, well almost, because you've got 3, up to 3. Which you can run together. You've got a lovely drift knob here, which sort of introduces a bit of authentic drifting into your oscillator tuning. But you can sync your oscillators together. Right, I just wanted to take a quick moment just to talk about that. So within Pigments, it has this virtual analog engine, and within that you have these 3 oscillators that can be these 4 different waveforms, but then you can modulate the heck out of them using either oscillator 3 or the noise source, which is also here. And use that to feed one into the other to completely screw with it. And all the time it's giving you the detail and the oscilloscope reading out here, so you can see exactly what's going on at the same time as everything is just going bonkers. And you can swap between oscillator 3 and the noise. So within this little part here, within this little engine of virtual analog oscillators, you can have no end of fun. I haven't touched any of this other crap all the way around the outside. I'm not even filtering anything, for heaven's sake. I'm just messing about with oscillators into oscillators. That's great. How useful that is in your little world of synthesis, I've no idea, but it's a load of fun. But should we move on to other things? Now this function thing here, I'm trying to work out what on earth this does. I've got a thing rocking down it. I can do things. I can increasingly make weird sort of envelope sort of shapes. And it's even got this button that says regen. I don't know what that does. I don't even know if I can press it. Can I press it? I'm not sure. Do I drag it? Maybe I drag it. Maybe I need to get the mouse involved. We will find out. But let's start with function 1. Function 1. Set modulation and mount directly on a control. So let's use our old friend, the filter. So as far as I can tell at the moment, it's just a modulation source. So it's acting very much like an envelope, but it's looping all by itself. It has a play mode where you can put it to 1, where it just goes the once. Or it can loop over and over. Or it can run, which means it goes by itself whether I'm pressed or not. I thought it did that with loop. Never mind. It has presets. So let's try to see if we can find something interesting in here. Like... Alright, so it has shapes. Okay, groovy. So that's what functions do. It's kind of an elaborate envelope gating tool where you can create anything you like. I think you can see that. That's fine. Let's look at these combis then. So again, we're trying to create something or put something together for modulation. You want a source plus a modulation and an amount. So source, we're going to go from, how about the mod wheel? No, let's go from LFO1. Okay, so this is what it's looking at so far. And we're going to modulate that with the Turing machine. And then we've got choices as to whether we want it to be summed or a difference, multiply, division, threshold, offset, lag, and crossfade. Very interesting. If we put multiply in, let's go to the LFO and speed that up a little bit. So now I've got this sort of shape going on. When I multiply, if I put a difference in, is that going to be something different? Don't know. Let's put this onto our friend, the filter. Or you can make it simpler and just simply have 2 LFOs affecting one another. So what we appear to be discovering is that the modulation engine within Pigments is quite extraordinary. It can put all sorts of things together. You know, you've got your standard LFOs, that's great. You've got your envelopes, that's fine. We all know how to use those sorts of things. I love the fact it has randomization in there because it's one of my favorite things. It's the thing that I have enjoyed discovering the most when it comes to modular synthesizers. And I've come to a point in my life where I believe that randomization should be in everything. It's the biggest disappointment to Cubase 10, for instance. There's no randomization. Why didn't they stick a load of that in like they did a little bit of in Studio One? And other DAWs have sort of started to cotton on to that idea of putting probability in there, putting randomization in there. I really enjoy those sorts of things. The functions, yeah, a really clever way of creating an envelope-based or shape-based modulation which can act as a gate, it can act as things moving stuff about in a more advanced and interesting way than you can with just a standard ADSR. And then if that kind of modulation is not good enough for you, you throw them together in the Combinator. You put two things together and add them up or take them away from each other and create new waveforms which are changing things. I mean, all this stuff is about adding flavor and movement and character to the sound that you're creating. And Pigments appears to give you a huge range of ways of doing that. And it's simple. It's really interesting because I find modulation matrices a little bit kind of head scratchy, like what I'm modulating what with what. You seem to have to always be doing things on purpose. I want this to go to here and I know what that's called and I know what that's called. When I often don't really. It's this knob that I want to do something with, and so I play with that. I don't really know what it's called exactly, but I want some modulation to it, and this allows you to do it just by tapping on what it is that you want, move the knob, and it's attached, you know. It's that sort of easy, and you've got this immediate, you know, a sonic response obviously, but also a visual one, which for someone like myself who works better when I have sound and visuals combined with each other, it really feeds into that way I like to work. So I can already see myself bypassing the presets. I mean, the presets are a lot of fun. You're always going to have a good time in the presets, but it's a time I feel that doesn't get you anywhere. It's just a time to play. You want to sit down and play, like picking up a guitar and play, that's fine. Presets, lovely. But if you want to create some sound, if you want to have the enjoyment, not of writing a piece of music necessarily, not of creating a song or a symphony, but of working with sound. That's what's interesting about this. I can sit down and just work with sound. I mean, just discovering that those oscillators can modulate each other was just fantastic. And I can get lost in creating just bonkers sounds just in those parameters alone. And it's only a small part of this synthesizer. But that's essentially where, for me, a software synthesizer is doing it right. Because there's a tendency for software synths just to provide us with this huge sonic palette. And that's okay, that's enjoyable, that's fun, but it's not as far as I want things to go. I want to be able to take a sound apart, start with a few basic things and start banging them together to see what happens. I want to experiment. Not experiment with just moving a couple of knobs, but experiment with how things interact with each other and how I get this to there. Can I get that to do that? Oh yeah, yes I can. Can I move that at the same time? Yeah, I can. And what happens when I do that? It's the possibility of discovery as well. And that's what you want. That's what I want in a software synth, because I'm, you know, very kind of bored, I guess, at this point of your standard software synth. I mean, I guess that also applies to hardware as well. But in hardware, at least, the invitation to explore, because of the control surface, because of the knobs, because of that kind of thing, is more obvious and more there. With software synths, you tend to load up GUI after GUI, and you're not really pulled in to move very much. You're just looking for a preset, looking for a little bit of tweak, add a little bit of effect, and off you go. So when you look deeper into a software synth, you want to find places where you can experiment and play readily, easily, without getting trapped into it. I mean, like I say, I haven't got a manual, and you can see me fumbling around a little bit, but I'm not fumbling around a lot. I'm discovering and finding and making connections relatively intuitively, relatively easily. And from my point of view, Arturia seem to have nailed that ease of use. You know, they've put everything out there on the screen. There's not a whole lot that's hidden behind menus or doing anything else. And as you start to experiment, you discover what these things do. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Right, the last space to talk about is a sequencer. Let's have a look in there. So here it is. This is the extraordinary sequencing panel. Yeah, I know it looks as dull as dishwater, but it is actually very, very powerful. So you have two choices. You've got an ARP, which is going to take the notes that you play. So when you go into the ARP bit, the pitch track here disappears. Very exciting. Or there's a sequencer side, which gives you the potential of entering pitches here. So it plays a sequence when you play a note. And then the sequencer pulls out a few parameters for you to play with. So you've got octave, which octave you're in, you've got velocity, you've got trigger probability. Oh yeah, I like that one. Gate length, and then slide. I can set it running, and then I can stick in a bunch of pitches. I have scale options here. I've got velocity I can of course affect, the octave that they're in, then start bringing in some trigger probability. Is it going to run, is it not? And gate length, and potentially some slide. Now already, hopefully you can see that that's pretty interesting. It's simple, it's easy to use, you just click and drag or drag about more or less where you want things to happen and what's going on. Easy, simple, easy. Now, what's more interesting is that it has this wonderful little randomization engine. As I've mentioned, I quite like randomization. Now you have a randomized setting on each of these tracks, which sets how much you want it to be randomized, if it's involved in the randomization. So you can turn that up and down a bit. If I turn everything a little bit up, I can hit the randomize button, and it happens. Now possibly you don't want it on slide, or you might want it a little bit less, for instance on gate length. But you can also add a cycle so that it will randomize every bar, half bar, 2 bars, 4 bars or whatever. So it can continuously be messing you about. And very quickly and easily it's writing music for you. So yeah, endless fun. Now it doesn't have to be 16 steps. You've got a slider over here where you can put it all back to 4 or to 8 or to whatever number you like. But again, what's more interesting is that over here you have a polyrhythm bit. Turn on polyrhythm and you can now change these individually. And all of these can be their own length. So now you've got some stuff going on. Just the thing about the presets, right? I know I've kind of talked you out of presets, but they are fantastic, and there's like 645 of them. But when you select one, you also get a little image of what's going on. You can see what engine 1 and 2 are like, and what the filters are set to. How nuts is that? It's like Arturia completely understand what it is that I like about visualizations. That's useful. Even when preset surfing, it's useful because I can see the sort of stuff it's going to be doing. And how cool is that? Although one thing I will mention is that there's no morphing between presets. The preset is there, you go to another preset and you get a gap. So there's no kind of nice overlap or flow between different presets like you'd get in something like Reactor or some other synths that I can't think of just right now. It goes violently from one to the other. You know, but that's hardly a failing. That's really, really very standard. But I would have liked to have seen the ability to morph from one preset to another. Well, maybe in version 2. So there you are, that's my crash on through Arturia Pigments. What do you think? Any good? I mean, the presets are fantastic. As I said, you can lose yourself in there for weeks just playing with the loveliness of that. And that's fine, that's one side of things. But what I really like is the ability to pull that apart. How you can start with a wavetable, you can mess that about. You can wavefold it and phase modulate it and FM it and stuff. And just start with that. Start with that, start modulating that, start filtering that. And then turn on perhaps the other engine and start feeding oscillators into each other with simple waveforms. And how easy that is. How it's not trying to overcomplicate it, but it allows you to create all sorts of complexity with buttons and knobs that you don't really know what they do, but they give you this instant response. I mean, visually, it's gorgeous. It's lovely. It's a bit grey in places, and as I say about the sequencer, that's as dull as anything. But on the whole, all of this stuff going on is great. That's exactly what software should be doing. Software gives us access to extraordinary worlds on our computers that are difficult to do in hardware. And this is that sort of thing. Why give you a blank hardware imitation GUI? Why do that? It doesn't offer anything over above the hardware other than the convenience of having it on your computer. So when you are making a software synth, make it visually fantastic because you can. Make everything move, animate everything, light up everything because you can. That's what computers are for. And Arturia seem to have grasped that completely and are doing that completely. Turn that on. So yeah, I've very much enjoyed playing around in here. I've only had it like a day or something. So I'm just steaming around, fiddling about, see what I can pull out of it. And there'll be a lot more deeper and probably better tutorials out there. But I hope that my little contribution to the release of Arturia Pigments has helped push a few people into looking at it differently, of getting beyond those presets and into what has it got? What does it have in there? What does it have that makes it different to all those other software synths that are out there? But what it does do well is that it invites you in to play and to discover, and all the tools are there to enable you to do that. So yeah, that's a whole bundle of fun. There's also this light bulb thing here that I don't really know what that does. I think it's trying to tell you something. I think it's trying to tell you what you could do with that control. And that's quite interesting because there is a little line that comes up down here that tells you stuff from time to time. It's just not always that helpful. I don't know. But have a go. And when in doubt, you know, attach it to a macro. Just see me smiling.